Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are. Today is July 25th, and this is another of our bi-weekly SIG Apps meetings. My name is Maciej, and I'll be your host today. Um, Quick announcements. The code freeze is expected to land around latter half of the next week, depending on where you are in your time zone. It'll be either August 2nd or August 3rd. I linked to the uh, release date so you can verify your exact timing. And a week later will be a test freeze. If you're not familiar with what these two are, code freeze is all the enhancements, all the code changes have to be merged by that date. Test freeze happening a week later allows us to submit only tests for a week longer than code changes. Janet, do we have any other announcements that you are aware of that I might have missed?
No.
Okay, cool. So we can jump to the main topic of our discussion, Philip, to discuss adding the new available conditions to replica sets, stateful sets, daemon set, and in general meaning of those various conditions. I've noticed that there was some initial pre-discussion happening on the mailing list. So if you haven't had a chance to look through that, it would be good to also read that for a better understanding. Philip, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, yeah. So the cap itself, which um, the cap is targeting like consolidating the statuses or the conditions across all the workloads we have. And I would like to keep it simple and focus first. Yeah, it's across 3 workloads on available condition, although the discussion in the mailing list focused mostly on the job. And if we have time, we can get to that as well. So like so I created the PR for the replica set available condition, and we had also a bit of discussion with Danielle that the available condition, like the meaning of the word, might not be that descriptive for replica sets, since there might be in general use case, there might be a lot of replicas that are not running. And so if you are familiar with the deployment available condition, this is like the base case which we are basing this off, but it's not exactly applicable for all of the others. I will explain why, and then we can come up with some solution. So for the replica sets, the main problem is that there might not be all the replicas running. And for stateful sets and daemon sets, I think the main problem is that in deployment, the replicas are equal, and the meaning of available might mean a different thing in the stateful set or daemon set, where each replica has a special function, either that is assigned to a node in case of the daemon set, or that is has its special PVC, for example, in stateful set. Yeah, I don't know. Does anybody have questions for these? Yeah, so I guess the main problem is in the naming. So there were some suggestions that instead, like the main focus is to have like the same names, meaning the same thing in each workload. So the user knows like what to expect from each workload, even like without looking at it. But the problem is the workloads are not the same. So that's why there is an option to use a bit different names for the available. Like one thing could be, we could have is to detect like that all of the desired replicas are available in replica set or Neiman set or stateful set, and have also such and also a possibility to have such a condition as an available where not all of the replicas are available. And in the case of deployment, when we are doing a new rollout, we have max unavailable. So this is taking into account when deciding if the available is true or not. So when we are rolling out, the deployment still can be considered available, even some of its replicas are not. Okay, does anybody have any opinion on this?
So, as I understand, the biggest issue that was raised by Daniel in the first PR, which is the replica set available condition API, was around the meaning of available for replica set. Um, Daniel claimed that it is possible for replica set with huge number of replicas assigned to it for such replica set to never get to the available state and rather be at, I don't know, 90% of their replicas running. So assuming we would have a replica set with 100 pods, Daniel was claiming that he has examples of multiple such replica sets where they would never reach those 100 pods, but rather they would be consistently averaging around 90 pods at a time. And that by itself would be sufficient um, to claim that the replica set is, and here he was proposing using some kind of a different term instead of available, but rather, I don't know, operational or something along those lines. But I was thinking through it a little bit more, and the problem that I'm seeing is we would have to have a um, a way for user to specify what is the threshold at which we would flip the switch from it's available or it's not, or it's operational or it's not. Whether that would be half half of the required replica set plus one, which means basically would be above half, or it's more like it should be hard coded around 80 or 90%. I'm curious if anyone from the community um, has faced a replica set where they would be consistently not reaching the desired number of replica sets, number of of pods uh, as defined in the replica set.
So you mean we could solve this in a way that we would introduce a field, for example, something like minimum operational or something?
That's something that I was actually considering because the problem that as I'm seeing it currently is that you are Daniel claims that uh, here's what I found his comment. He was advocating not to include available at all because that's rarely the case where when it happens. But to be able to say functional, operational, or something like that we would need to know the threshold at which the user claims their replica set functional or operational, whatever the name would be chosen, because I'm pretty sure that even if we hard code it at any given percentage, whether that'll be 51%, 75, 80, or 90% of pods available, uh, the moment we introduce such functionality, there will be questions about how can I make my mm, replica set report functional sooner than that. So I'm curious. I remember we were talking about it last week. Uh, did you get any feedback from other people about having a replica set which never reaches the desired number of pods?
Yeah, I asked around, but no, I did not get any feedback.
Okay.
Yeah, so like I think one issue with this approach, even though yeah, for replica sets it could work great, I think for customers like this, uh, but if we take it in the context of consolidating it across all of the workloads, and so like the meaning of also the available condition is a bit different compared to this. So in case of other workloads like the deployment, uh, we would be also considering like introducing this condition as well here.
Yes, that's my understanding. We would be introducing whether that would be functional, operational, whatever the name we come up with, it would apply equally across the board. Can you remind me what was the current available condition for deployment? As soon as we create the replica set, we report available, um, or it is reported after the rollout is completed.
I think it just counts together like the available replicas with max unavailable. And I think it's inconsequential on the rollout, if I remember correctly.
Okay.
Yeah, but since the max unavailable is a rollout thing, uh, and also like in the case for available and progressing, these both are pretty rollout dependent.
Mhm.
And so I guess we already have the problem like with progressing, and I guess to some extent with available that people are misunderstanding these two conditions that they are tied together with a rollout. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm curious if we would go with uh, operational or functional, um, in case of a replica set, then what it would mean for our deployment to be operational? Would it mean that it would get functional the moment the new replica set gets functional? Because in that case, we could actually depend the condition of the higher level controller on the state of their lower level controller. So the moment the new replica set um, reports functional, that means we could actually make the deployment also functional. But the question is, does it mean that for the time of the rollout it is not functional?
Yeah, I think it's a good idea that it would depend on the logic of replica set. And I suppose like if you can like put any threshold you like, I guess it could be also independent on the rollout.
That threshold is something that I would be personally not in favor of introducing, and I would rather have it either hard coded or um I don't know, because that would again we would have to introduce this threshold across the board. sorry, for all the controllers, which is not something that I'm actually interested in doing as of now. So I would rather uh, have it done differently. Um, I guess we won't be able to come to any conclusion. I've linked the mailing list thread that Philip started last Friday about the topic, even though it initially steered toward jobs, which is something that, if I remember correctly, and if I understood Philip correctly, we would be taking care of at a later stage. I'll try to comment on the in the thread such that we get it back to the original point of discussion, namely the functional slash operational slash available conditions, and let's try to work it out. Just like Clayton described in the email thread, this topic is not something uh, that we will be able to, or we are not interested in pushing this quickly through because the end goal of the entire changes is to ensure that we can build tooling on top of those controllers such that they can consistently talk with any other controller happening beneath it. So, like the example of deployment, which is built on top of replica set, would be reusing the same condition to report further up the chain. In a similar manner, the external tools would be reusing those conditions and consume those conditions to make informed decisions. Okay. So does
Yeah,
anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Phil. Do you have anything?
yeah, I think that makes sense. We probably have to start another discussion on this functional slash operational, or maybe I guess we could also open a cap for this and target replica set deployment uh, at least. What do you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, let's start simple and focus on this one particular condition. Let's try to solve it at least for the workload controllers with the job or the workload the batch controllers at the back of our mind, and then slowly hopefully come to a conclusion. Like I said, it's not something that I want to push quickly through, but rather focus and get a decent feedback from the community and be able to have a reasonable conclusion.
Yeah, I think it would make sense to make this cap for the like for the, also for the stateful set and daemon set, because as I mentioned in the beginning, I don't think like available properly describes like what would be expected, uh, and maybe this other condition would suit them better, and the available condition could stay maybe only in the deployment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally agree. Okay. Um, does anyone have any other topics that they want to discuss with the group?
Yeah, I guess if somebody wants to discuss also the job, even though we are, as Matti said, we are not considering that at the moment, but I know that the mailing list mentioned it. So if somebody came here to ask for the job, please go ahead.
Okay. Hearing no other topics, I'm gonna give you back about 37 minutes of your time. Thank you very much, all, and see you next time. Bye, all.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.